All right, we need to put an end to censorship, any kind of censorship, and restore my favorite, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and free speech in America. aka the First Amendment, joining as the leader of the anti-censorship crusade lawsuit, Missouri Senator Eric Schmitt, who started this journey as Missouri Attorney General when he made the move. Senator Schmitt, as always, sir, we are delighted to have you. Before you and I begin, let's just play a quick one from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at the congressional hearing yesterday. Please take a listen.
We need to be talking to each other. Now, this is a letter that many of you signed, many of my fellow Democrats. I've spent my life in this party. I've devoted my life to the values of this party. There's 102 people signed this. This itself is evidence of the problem that this hearing was convened to address. This is an attempt to censor a censorship hearing. The charges in this, and by the way, censorship is antithetical to our party. It was appalling to my father, to my uncle, to FDR, to Harry Truman, to Thomas Jefferson.
All right, there you have it. Pretty strong words, very interesting, and how he called out fellow Democrats who tried to censor the hearing itself, which puts them even further behind the eight ball. So, Senator Schmitt, what happens next? You have this Louisiana federal judge who makes this important ruling. He's starting to call out by name specific White House staff people. But then on the other side, you got the social media companies that went along with it. They say they won't again, but who believes them? So how do you read this, Senator Schmitt?
Well, I think it's important to sort of amplify the point that was made, by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. yesterday, which is this is what we're seeing in this country right now from the Biden administration. There has been no administration in the history of the United States of America that's been more hostile to the First Amendment rights of its own citizens than the Biden administration. That is the truth. And those aren't allegations. That has been proven by documents, by emails, by depositions. The weaponization of the federal government to coerce and collude with the biggest companies in the history of the world, these big tech giants, to silence Americans, it happened. And we got to make sure it never happens again, because the broader point here is you want to understand why people are frustrated out there is because they see the things that are happening in these hearings, they want to talk about it, and then they're trying to get shut down, or the mainstream media just refuses to cover it, right? Or they had questions about COVID or the vaccine or whatever, and they were shut down, they were silenced and deplatformed. We have to have a robust marketplace of ideas that people feel free to engage in, not just in the physical town square that we were used to, but now in the virtual town square where people can, air their opinions. And it's incumbent upon all of us, I think, to tolerate the opinions that we don't even disagree with or that we don't agree with, that we'll fight for people's right to say things that we don't agree with. But this idea of labeling everything misinformation or disinformation and shutting them down, it's antithetical to our republic. The idea is it's a pressure release valve. In most parts of the world, Larry, these disputes are resolved through violence. But America has been that exception. We believe that we can have the exchange of ideas and that people, individuals, regular folks can make their own decisions, and they send people to represent them that represent the way they think, and that's really important. But I think, where does this go next? This is going to continue through the court system. This case, the Missouri versus Biden case that I filed when I was AG, it's going to end up at the Supreme Court. It probably should, because it's the most important lawsuit and case on the First Amendment in generations, because we're dealing now with a new, the new platforms that didn't exist the last time these big cases were settled. But I think, the next phase is I've introduced, along with Senator Rand Paul and others, legislation that would allow individuals to sue individual federal government officials who violate their First Amendment rights. We got to make sure they're not colluding and coercing big tech giants to do their bidding, and also outsourcing this to universities like Stanford and the University of Washington that were doing some of this monitoring that led to this. So we have to fundamentally dismantle this censorship enterprise, and we got to be committed to it. I think this is the fight, Larry. I believe in it with all my heart, and it's so important for the survival of our republic.
Should we allow individuals to sue the social media companies who fell into this?
Absolutely. And so I've already filed legislation on this, Larry, that would say that if your First Amendment rights have been violated, you can sue them and they lose their Section 230 protections. Because right now, they're not treated as a publisher or like a regular news network. Because when they were created in the 90s, they were considered these open platforms where people could have their say. That's not what's happening right now. So if you got to pick, are you going to be an open platform, or are you going to be like a typical, news agency? And they're choosing to edit themselves and censor themselves in the sense that they can decide. That might be consistent with their terms of service, but you no longer get the legal protections of Section 230 if you're going to violate people's First Amendment rights.
So we got to change some laws. That's from correct me if I'm wrong, 1996, way back then, telecoms, I think it was called the Telecom Indecency Act or Decency Act or some such thing. Leave the good, but take out the bad. You're right. They're operating. They're just not platforms. They're operating as editors. That's what they're doing.
That's right.
They have a point of view. And that's when they sign on to this nonsense. So that has to be stopped, you're saying. So both sides. The White House has to be stopped. The social media companies have to be stopped. Fair?
Yep. That's the way we have to approach this. Is we got to take on the government actors who can't violate your First Amendment rights, and they can't outsource it either. They can't collude. I mean, Larry, they were threatening legal action against these social media companies if they didn't do their bidding, if they didn't take down specific posts. The Surgeon General of the United States communicating directly with senior Facebook officials. This was widespread. It was pervasive. It's un-American. So we take on the government actors, then we also have to have repercussions for social media companies that violate First Amendment rights, that they lose those protections as well.
Spot on, Senator Eric Schmitt of Missouri. Thank you, sir.